programmes, I should say. I'm on with Jeremy and Rosie tomorrow morning talking about politics at 7:10. But, I mean, this was sent in by a viewer. Great story. It's about it's a really interesting story and a very worrying story as well, about UK's tiny houses being woefully ill-prepared for an ageing population. So babies born this century, 21st century, expected to live to 100 by 2050. So 1 in 4 people in 2050 will be over 65. They'll need somewhere to live. That will need to be suited to their needs. In adults, in later life, we see dementia is a much bigger problem now. Arthritis, cognitive impairment I've talked about, heart problems, issues with hearing and vision. These are issues, and your house often, we've seen those things, whether it's to help you get out of the bath, whether it's widening a doorway or whatever needs to be done to help people with some form of impairment or disability. But the problem is that the UK's housing stock, we've talked about housing being a problem, it's nowhere near ready to cater to this need. Only 9% of British homes meet basic accessibility standards. I'd love to hear from people who've had their homes adapted or have had to move perhaps because their homes need to be adapted. I know we have some viewers and listeners who are disabled and maybe this has affected them, or maybe you're worried it's going to affect you or your family. Well, a great guest we spoke to a few weeks ago, Dr. Amo Raju, who has an OBE actually, he's the Chief Executive of Disability Direct, was on, and I thought, you know what, we've got to get that guy on again to talk about this. Amo, great to talk to you. How big a problem is this for people who are interacting with your services?
Housing's always been one of our top inquiries, and lack of accessible housing's right up there with benefits. The issue is we have an aging population, as you say, and we have a dwindling number of care homes as well, because it's just not financially feasible for people to run care homes anymore, and local authorities don't pay enough in the private sector for placement. So more and more people do end up needing to stay within their own homes, which are not suitable because they need adaptations, or the doors need widening, or whatever. And to apply for something like a disabled facilities grant through your local authority can take months and months and months. And by then, and in many cases that I've come across, the poor older person or disabled person has passed away, and they just lived in inadequate housing during that process.
It's really difficult. I mean, this is affecting a lot of people, as you say. It's right up there with the benefits issue. Not enough attention is paid to this, which is why I want to pay attention to it. How many people are waiting for this? I mean, the process is so long and difficult as well to say, look, I've got a need, it needs to be sorted. But, I mean, how many people are actually kind of moving out of their homes? What's your experience of this?
Well, there's not that many moving out of their homes. They're having to stay in there in poor, as you use the term, tiny houses. They are small houses, and often, in many cases, older members of the family end up having to move in with the children, or vice versa, and the house becomes even more cramped because, and one of the reasons they have to move in and live together is simply because the social care system isn't adequate, isn't meeting the person's needs, so the family has to step in. And the knock-on effect is also people living in cramped housing with poor health conditions and increase in mental health issues as well, because you and I, if we stay in one tiny area for too long, it is going to affect us mentally.
Of course it is. Of course it is. Yeah. What can the government do to make things more straightforward, do you think? What can they do for disabled people?
The process needs to be smoother and swifter in terms of applying for disabled facilities grants and the whole assessment process, etc. But on top of that, there's a lot of houses that have already been adapted in local authorities, and sometimes they end up going into general housing stock again.
So they need to be held back, you think, for people with disabilities?
Yeah, yeah.
Is that reasonable to expect a commercial company to do that and say, actually, we're just going to wait until there's need here?
Well, what you'll find is if they put the word out that we've got this property, and not just to those on the local authority housing register, but to the wider population, they will find people will come forward to say, I've got needs that, I fall outside the criterion applying for state help, but I've got this particular need, or my child has a need. I'll give you an example. My father passed away at Christmas, and he had to adapt his house. And we're now putting the house on the market, and we're going to try and market it to somebody who's got a disabled person in the household who may
Yeah.
benefit from this
Yeah.
downstairs adapted property. And that's what needs to happen. People need to get a little bit savvy in terms of, sometimes you can spend thousands on a property adapting it, and it goes to waste if it just disappears into general housing stock.
Yeah, I have a disabled neighbour actually in Northern Ireland. Great guy, Gary's his name, and he's a friend of mine. And his home was adapted for disabled use from the people who lived in it previously, and they sold it to him, or to his family, I should say. And that worked out really, really well. I'm sorry to hear about your dad as well. I'm really sorry to hear about that, but I'm sure he would be very proud of the work you do and the fact that you're going to try and market his house to someone who really needs it.
Hopefully.
Okay, well, thanks very much indeed for your time. Really appreciate that. That's Dr. Amo Raju OBE, who is the Chief Executive of Disability Direct. Really interesting to hear from him. And if you're affected by this, let me know, actually. Mick has been in touch. Say, I'm elderly, I'm disabled. I live on the top 7th floor flat. There's no equipment or plan to get us out in case of fire. Nobody cares, says Mick. My goodness, I wonder, I mean, that must be illegal.